Clifford,
Hey, brother.
what's up,
How you
man? How you
doing?
doing today?
Doing good, doing good. How about yourself?
I can't complain, man. It's been a rough week, but maybe things are turning the corner today. It looks like we'll see.
Okay, sounds like a plan. That's a good way
I'm
to look
looking
at
at
it.
I'm look exactly. I'm looking at the broken glass from the spilled milk, and I'm trying to see a full glass. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Nice, man.
All
Nice.
right.
So tell me, before we jump into the episode, let's do the library conversation first, because it may turn into relevancy of the episode.
Oh, yeah. So I'm creating something called the Cliff Notes.
Yes.
And it's going to be a 3-piece framework. So it's going to go into a hook to engage them and get them in a certain state, a story, and then a 3-piece framework. Super simple, super actionable, and can be leveraged.
I love the name. I just started. Dude, it's weird. I just started the same thing on Monday.
Did you?
I'm calling it. I'm just doing random topics. I have like a ton of topics, but the first one was I almost quit, but I didn't. And I'm going back and I'm telling stories of some time where I was going to quit doing something and I didn't, and then how it turned out. But I'm kind of doing a duality where it's like one clip is, they're all under 5 minutes is the goal. And
Nice.
The one clip is going to be some positive part, and then another is going to be, I missed out because I quit and stuff like that. So it's like trying to show that like sometimes it's okay to quit and sometimes it isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I really like that, because as I'm going through multiple transformations as I go through this journey, and I go, oh my goodness, all this game is a game of behavioral systems at the end of the day, and which behaviors serve us versus the ones that do not. Like, I literally just yelled at my kids, right? And I yelled at them with complete intentionality on saying, hey, when you act like this, it does this. And when you act calm, it calms the situation down. We are all on the same team, and we can fight and claw at each other, or we can communicate effectively and figure out how to make things work. And I yelled, do you want me to be like this? Or do you want me to be like this? I'm not even yelling at, and it's very interesting, because I'm realizing I'm not yelling that way because of the high achiever in me that says, don't do too much, don't be too much, and it's all just conditioning. That's all any of this is.
I love that you're doing this too, because I think that one thing I'm realizing, and I say this a lot on our show, but I'm realizing it in all aspects of my life, is that I used to think about the consistency was like, going to the gym every single day, or every day you schedule to go. And I was always never able to like necessarily always do that consistently for my physical health. But now that I'm like really getting introspective in the past year into my mental health and like my behaviors and my psyche, that has become, I think that'll, once I get to a good place with that in my consistency, I feel like the other piece will fall in, because I really think that I wasn't going to the gym and I wasn't doing what I needed to do from a physical standpoint because I didn't have the mental part figured out. And like I had that when I was younger, when I was very active in sports. Getting up and going to the gym, it was just part of my life cycle. But also my mental health was better back then, and it didn't have whatever has happened over the past 20 years or 15 years of my career. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I think that it's important for people to talk to people like you. Like, I'm an everyday person that everybody can connect to. But as soon as, for you, I'm sure when people see UFC, Bellator, they might be standoffish. We're like, well, I can never achieve that, so I can't connect with him. And I think that's something I think is great about our show, and I think is even better about what you're doing with that series and that library. That's awesome, man. Are you getting hired now to do like speaking gigs and stuff at conventions, or is it you attending conventions and stuff?
It's a combination of me getting hired out and also me being really intentional with getting more speaking conventions, because what I realized, everything's in front of us all the time. It's just whether we realize it or not.
Yep.
And I started reaching out to entrepreneurs, and I realized, like, oh my goodness, we're all in the same team, and we forget that.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my mom a couple weeks ago, and I was really struggling, like, because I'm trying to get the sponsorship going and all this other stuff, and I was going about it in a way that was really sales focused, as opposed like selling your products, and we'll put your products on and sell through. Mm-hmm. And my mom was like, she goes, Nate, like, that's never, like, you're a great salesman, but that was never what your value was to society. She's like, your value, and my degree is in corporate communications and public relations. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until she pointed it out, she's like, you really need to look at being a speaker. And I did that. I did it for, I've done it. I did it with Chamber of Commerce's, tourism bureaus, and economic development. Mm-hmm. So last week I put together two different things. One is a workshop, and then one is a lecture series. And I've been cold outreaching Chamber of Commerce's and economic developments and conventions. And it's called Analog Stories in a Digital World. Because I started analyzing my career, and I was like, well, I'm a salesman. I actually went back and I was like, I was never a salesman. I was always a storyteller. Yeah. And it was always, and that's what sold the product.
Are we recording right now? Because this is good stuff.
So, we are recording.
Okay. Because as I go through this, I love what it is that you're saying, and like what's bouncing up and down in my mind. Selling is story and story is sales, but we've been conditioned to believe like, oh yeah, whoa, this is selling over here, and this is storytelling. So this is what you do. You don't do that.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, that's like the same as, oh, well, you're a fighter and a UFC fighter and a Bellator fighter, and you are on this pedestal, and you're on this pedestal where no one can touch you, and it's true. Because it's in their head. Yep. And so the truth is always in a person's head, and all a truth is a belief system. And until the belief system is challenged, then it remains their truth. And all a belief system is a doubt. Because until you actually go through it and understand it, then you go, oh, I know this. Like, I really, really know this piece of me. And so as a fighter, like, I knew my dark side and I knew it well. And I also knew how to control it, because a good fighter knows how to control the dark side of them. If they don't control it, they're going to lose. They're going to lose to a more strategic ninja type fighter, because when your dark side is out and you have no control over it, that means they have control over you and what you're doing. And that's not a good space to be in.
Dude, I love that. There's a phrase I used the other day with somebody when I was talking about, like, I always had a self-consciousness about sometimes my passion. And when that passion, like you just said, about being controlled and sometimes can be defensive. And it hasn't been that case in about 7 or 8 months. I've been really doing well with that. But I always felt bad about it. It turned into bad problems, whether it was in a relationship or with my kids. And I would react so many different ways. And it wasn't until I realized what you're saying right now. And when I was in this conversation, I gave you credit actually for it. Mm-hmm. And my phrase that came out in the middle of the conversation was, I'm a teddy bear that can migrate to a grizzly bear pretty quickly. and it wasn't until I realized that I used to be like, well, that's just me. You know what I mean? And if I acted like that, you deserved it. Mm-hmm. And it's not until the past couple of months that I've really realized the control part, where there's actually so much more power in controlling the grizzly bear and finding the middle ground. And I don't know, it's been a true turning point in my life, from every aspect. And when I look back, and some points when I might have blamed somebody else, I was like, I've been looking back in stories in my head as I sit at night, and I'm like, oh, that was me. Yeah, that wasn't them. I was like, they totally gave it to me, and I just bulldozed it with the grizzly bear. Yeah. And it's like, it's a real power and confidence, and I'm excited I'm really excited for this year. Like I want the weather to change a little bit over here. It's freaking 20 degrees today. What's that?
I'm gonna mute and yell from time to time because I could hear them in the background.
It's all good. I'll make sure to chop it up when I'm editing. No worries.
Awesome. Yeah, I go. And you know what I love about what you do, and this is what the game really is. I go, oh my goodness, nothing happens by accident. Like nothing. Right? And there's a certain, I like the raw realness of life because that is life. But people try to hide the raw realness of life too. And that's life as well. Like that's the funny thing. Like both are life, and people are good at pointing at what life should be though. But the truth is life is what you make it, because it always is. And so ultimately when I'm like, oh, I get to hang out with Nate, like, yeah, my boy Nate will never openly try and embarrass me, and I won't openly try to embarrass him. And like Jordan Peterson, I feel for that guy sometimes, because I mean he goes on these stages. I feel for him, but I'm empowered by him too. Like he goes in hostile territory to have conversation, and that's a beast. Like that's a beast to go like, okay, I'm gonna go in this hostile conversation. I already know what they're looking to do. I know they're trying to poke the grizzly. Like, oh, if I can get the grizzly out, ooh, I'm gonna make him look really, really grizzly, and then I'm gonna play it off like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you have that side.
As I played back, I was like, I also, when I was playing it back, I realized certain times where people were manipulating it. And that's where I was like, you know what? Because I didn't all of a sudden take ownership of everything. There's also times where when I went back, I was like, no, they did deserve it, and they did it intentionally. And I gave them that. And I gave them that power, and I gave them that control over me. And that was a shock. And that's been about a week or two when I started doing that introspection. And that for me was a real shock, but also a real motivator. Because in my sober journey from alcohol, it's been all about controlling my life and controlling my thoughts and controlling everything. And I didn't realize how many other things, even getting alcohol out of it, I still had a bunch of work to do. And in that work, realizing like I could easily blame alcohol for everything. That's not the case.
I love that so much. And I'm going to hold on to that point. I'm going to deal with these little ones real quick.
You're good.
All right. So what I love so much about that, so much, there's people who just start on their growth journey. They just started it, right? In their 50s, in their 60s. And then there's this, it's weird. It's like this weird judgmentalness. That's what I've seen, at least, because they've started on something, and you almost have to judge something when you start on something. Like I'm not saying I'm immune to it either. I just got like, I was judging really early on because I wanted people to win so bad. And I wanted them to win so badly where I'm like, oh, why doesn't everybody want to win? What's wrong with it? And it's like, oh, they have to be in the right place and in the right state to want to even win for themselves. And sometimes they don't know what winning is because they haven't lost bad enough.
That's power right there. That's the number one thing I found is the people that do poke and the people that do manipulate, they've never had an empty bank account. You know what I mean? Yeah. They've never had to sweat an electric bill. Yeah. And they've never been, and some might come back and say, oh yeah, I have. And if anybody I've had one person that since I've talked about this that told me, oh, I've never had that. And then my immediate response is, then why would you act like that? Yep. If you have been there, then why would you not connect with the other person in that way? why do you think that those once you can establish that feeling you had is other people are feeling that, we suppress it with that. We do the emo or emu. We do where you just put your head in the sand. You know, when you're scared, you just bury your head. And I think that I'm not a therapist or anything like that by any means, but it really seems like it's part of that though, where they're in a state now where they're not like that. So instead of keeping that, you know what we grew up with, like, remember where you came from. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure for you heard it a lot when you got into the UFC. It was like, stay humble, remember where you came from. But that statement is so much more than just the geography or the family or the culture you came from. It's really understanding the struggles and understanding the emotions that you came from.
Yeah. And what's crazy, like, because I like taking words and I like challenging the word. I realize I have a very rebellious brain, and I also have I'm very agreeable as well. It's a very interesting combination. So my brain will rebel and look for different differences in a word, and it would also be very agreeable with yes and, right? And one of my coaches actually helped me with yes and, because I used to say yes but. And yes but is like, I'm going to actually not agree with what you're saying and say this. But yes and is, yes, that's true, right? So I look at humility and I think it's such a powerful thing. And everything has a double-edged sword to it as well. And part of my humility was stay down to the ground, keep your feet on the ground, keep your feet on the ground, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. And I actually was limiting myself as a leader. And I didn't know I was doing it. I had one of my friends actually call me on it because I asked him, what do you love about me as a leader? And he listed like 10 things. And then I asked him, and where am I not good as a leader? And that was the thing he didn't actually even want to say. And it was one thing. And I'm like, he goes, are you sure you want to hear this? I go, yeah, I wouldn't have asked the question if I didn't want to hear the answer. Like, is there like 11 things? Like in my head, I'm thinking like, holy crap.
He's pulling a scroll.
Yeah, I'm like, do you have like a Santa list of bad things? One thing. He goes, Cliff, you hang around people who play in third and fourth gear, and it's fast to them because you're playing in fifth gear, but you have a gear that you don't even play in. You have a sixth gear that you don't even play in. And I didn't get what he meant until I started really, really understanding it. Like, me and you have had conversations off video, and it's like, we go deep. We go really, really deep. And I like those conversations with people. I like to go really, really deep and really, really get to the root of things, because most people, their challenges are very superficial. They're very superficial, and that doesn't make them wrong. It's just what they're seeing with what they're seeing. And even when I started my personal training journey, when I got out of personal training, I'd be like, I'm not a trainer. I don't want to be known as a trainer. Because I knew it was a mental game. So I was dealing with my own crap in saying they need to see what they cannot see. Instead of like, okay, show them what they can at least see before you start playing into what they cannot see, because that is too much. But I got really good at that. And I got so good at that, I wasn't playing in certain gears that I could play into and going into certain depths that I could go into, partially in fear of not being liked. I liked being liked by other people. And when I go into that deep, deep space, if they're not in the right state, they're not going to like me very much.
There's staying on that metaphor, you know what I mean? If you're not changing gears, you're going to burn your clutch out.
Yep.
Hey creators, founders, and dreamers, the Free Mind Network is brought to you by Cowabunga Johnny, where nostalgia meets creativity. Cowabunga Johnny creates custom cards that are perfect for personal keepsakes, team recognition, or even promotional items. These cards pop with personality and make an unforgettable impact. But that's not all. Cowabunga Johnny also crafts larger-than-life murals and nostalgic pop culture-inspired art. It's about connecting with your audience through bold, memorable visuals. Want to learn more? Visit cowabungajohnny.com and see how he's turning memories into art that connects. Let's create something amazing together.
And I think it's not unique to sports, but it is unique to a certain type of people that I think that maintain, let's say people that really dove into wrestling but really dove into wrestling, not just, hey, it's a sport, I'm doing it, really dove into the psychology of what it takes to be successful as a wrestler. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter in wrestling. I rarely hit the weight room when I was in the peak of my wrestling career, but I was mentally stronger than everybody else that I wrestled. And I was actually, I think I talked about this before. I weighed 192 and I wrestled heavyweight because I couldn't beat the 215 pounder and I couldn't beat the 189 pounder. So I went on to heavyweight. So I was giving up 80 to 100 pounds sometimes in a match. Yep. And sometimes it worked out because it was just a big refrigerator that didn't move very well and I was able to maneuver around them. But sometimes it was a beast. Yep. And those beasts that I beat, thought they were going to win before we even got on the mat because they looked at me and I had some muscle, you know what I mean? But I wasn't beast mode muscle. Yeah. You know, and they would just look at me and be like, I got this chump. And I would walk over to them and dude, I would like, when we used to have the bout sheets on the wall, in the hallways and stuff like that. Yeah. Like they would walk up to me and stand next to me and like breathe on my shoulder and try to intimidate me. And I would just turn around and be like, hey, what's up, man? I'm Nate. And I'd start and I would be dismantling their psychology because they're trying to intimidate me and I'm trying to befriend them. And at the time, it wasn't to necessarily be their friend, but it was to de-escalate the situation. And because I knew the head games never worked for me. It was always one of those things where even my dad, I joke around with him all the time when I was a kid, but he would go down and be like, he was the dad that was like, hey, there's your guy, there's your next component right down there. Look at him getting ready. You should get ready. Yeah. And I would be like pacing around or whatever else. My dad would be like, take some shots, do this. But I was a visualization guy. So I would go take walks back and forth down the hallway 20, 30 minutes before my match. And I wasn't pacing out of anxiety. I was making everybody else nervous. They're like, why is he just pacing around? In my head, I was wrestling. And I was like, okay, he's going to come down and do this, and I'm going to do this, and then that. And then I was looking at his body structure, and I was like, all right, he's a little top heavy, so he's going to, and I was analyzing every piece of what it was to the point where, you know, I never made eye contact with anybody while I was wrestling them. And people would always be like, man, that guy never looks at me whenever I'm wrestling him. And it messed with a lot of people. I was always looking at their hips, and I was always looking at their hands and their feet. And my coach always told me, he was like, never make eye contact because your face doesn't tell you anything. People can make faces. They can scowl at you. The actions are where their subconscious is, and that is in their hips. It's in their feet, and it's in their hands. That then transitioned and then propelled through the rest of my life in the way that I read people. You know, I went and I started like researching or watching like, you know, podcasts with ex-CIA agents and profilers and things like that. And all of a sudden I'm listening to them talk about their training and their schooling. And I'm like, damn, dude, that was exactly what we learned in wrestling. It was just watch the gestures, watch the timing, watch the reaction from the body, not from the face. Everyone can control their facial features, but nobody can control, only a certain amount of people can control the actual subconscious or unconscious movements of their body.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And the other piece, like as I've been looking through the journey, talking about that cerebral approach to athleticism, I had a very cerebral approach, and people think it's the thing that they can see, not what they can't, right? And I started believing it was the thing that they could see too. Like I thought I was getting lucky and I was stronger and I was just like, I'm a super athlete, I'm all of these. And then I go, you know, if anyone did 1,000 push-ups a day, they'd get pretty damn strong. Like that wasn't like, oops, I just fell out of bed and I have this big, amazing chest and these shoulders and these arms. Like, no, that was worked with complete intentionality. And so I started going, wow, we're looking at all of the uncontrollables instead of the controllables. I look at the news, I look at Facebook, I look at Twitter, I look at all of this stuff, and everything is vowing for our attention, for their intention, not for ours. They're not going like, man, they're kind of doing it to get more of our attention. Like, it's like, what does Cliff want to see? So we can give him more of that stuff to see. That's it. And so this is where it gets interesting. I'm literally thinking about this in real time. So since they're going to give you what you want to see anyway, you might as well choose what you're looking to see. Choose it with complete intentionality. And that's why it shows me personal development. It shows me entrepreneurs and business owners who are looking to grow. It shows me those kind of things. It doesn't show me like, well, we had a shitstorm again and this is what happened. Like, because I'm not actually looking for that stuff. And I go, wow, social media is just being what it's supposed to be, giving us what we want, not even realizing that we're getting what we want. And we're becoming more and more of what we want because of what we're asking for.
It's that they call it, I think they call it like circular journalism or something like that. There's some term for it. I'm probably butchering it, but it's where one journalist comes out with an article that is profound and it has, lots of views and all this stuff. And then it might not be true or not. Nobody really validates it, but because it's growing in attention, all of a sudden you see that concept being picked up by all these other entities. And whether it's the conversation, the topic, the scene, whatever it is. And with that, I will pick on I won't name the name of who it is, but like, for example, like with this speaking tour and the workshop, I'm reaching out to a lot of civic associations, trade associations, people that have monthly meetings and they hire speakers for it. And it's interesting how some of them are like, very much like, yeah, absolutely. Like, we'll present this to the board. We'll get back to you in a few weeks. And then some are like, we only allow presenters that are members of our association. And I kind of laugh at that now because when you look at these trade organizations, you find the number one issue that they're missing is new membership. And they're kind of like the social clubs. And out where I live, we have a lot of these things. I don't know if you have in Arizona, but they're like Moose Lodge, Elk Lodge, those different drinking bars that you have to be a member to go drink at.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. What their number one issue is new membership. Their members are, I hate to say it, but their members are dying, retiring, or whatever else. And when you only live within your sphere of whether it's your algorithm or your group of friends, if you only stay in that circle and that circular kind of journalism and conversation, you're right. Opportunities are going to fly by you like a highway, and you're just going to be staring at the building that's on the side of the road instead of watching the cars go by that are opportunities.
It's such an interesting realization that you're bringing up, because I feel like you almost have to go through that in every journey. I went through, you got to find your niche and define down and just speak directly to your niche. And then you got to, because you're stupid, speaking to anyone and everybody, it doesn't work. And this is why it doesn't work. And then I start looking at like, okay, the Russell Brunson, he actually started generalizing more and more because of the audience that was resonating with what he had. So entrepreneurs, their growth mindset, they're crazy. Like, I love entrepreneurs because they are so crazy. They're nuts. Yeah. And so I'm like, wow, holy crap. These have been my people and I didn't even know they were my people. Like, holy crap, that's kind of cool. And when you generalize the message, you allow them to actually play within the message. And I go, oh crap. So when you can generalize a question and allow for growth within the question. Like if I say, what's going well in your life, you're literally showing me your journey, your pathways, your way of action. And then I say, what's not going well in your life? You're still showing me like the patterns. I'm seeing it. And it's a general question. Anyone can ask that. It's not like a specific tough question. And I'm like, wow, this is such a trip. So there's a guy, Mark Firth. He's in LinkedIn. The guy's an absolute genius. I love the way he thinks. And He goes, the most important thing is getting the numbers, because when you get the numbers, the people who resonate with you for deeper things is always going to resonate with you. You don't know where they're coming from. And so I go, oh my goodness, we target so deeply and so tightly that we basically target ourselves out of opportunities.
It's just like in high school, like I wasn't like my daughter and I were talking about this. She's very much like me, and my son's like me when it comes to this as well. You go to the cafeteria in high school and you have your cliques. But my kids are like the same as me, where like I always sat at a different table every day for lunch. And people always, my friends, like my core group of friends, were always like, it would hurt their feelings, I think, at that age, because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I was friends with everybody. I was friends with the jocks. I was friends with the nerds. I was in theater. I was in band. I was on the wrestling team. I was on the football team. I was the biggest confusion to everybody, because they're like, is he the masculine alpha or is he gay? I don't really know what he is. But and over time I was self-conscious about it, but it felt natural.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time questioning myself in my younger years, to where now I see it now as such a powerful thing in society, because society is just a giant cafeteria.
It is a giant cafeteria. I go, just have fun having fun. That's what I say in life. Have fun having fun. And I get it. I know how to be practical. I know how to be analytical. I know how to be cerebral. So you're not telling me anything that I don't know how to do, because I've stepped inside of a cage. I've been punched in the face. I know how to strategize and be like, I know those pieces are important. But I challenge anyone and everybody to be like, okay, when you're not having fun doing something, show me how you learn faster. Show me a faster way you learn. And we'll use like, I learned my greatest lessons losing at something you enjoyed, motherfucker. No, everybody misses that piece. Everyone misses that piece. They go, you gotta fail. Fail at stuff that you like, because when you fail at something you like, you want to get better at that thing.
Yes, exactly. You never failed at a shitty job and then kept doing it. You quit.
Like, man, I fucking failed at this thing that I don't like doing. Let me go learn about it. Like, no one's gonna do that.
Dude, it's incredible that it's incredible the amount of things that don't register at certain stages of our life. And then at this stage, we're about the same age, and it's like, it seems like just a flooding culmination of, like, sometimes it's honestly overwhelming some days, where I'm like, hey, I know how to do this. Oh, and I know how to do this because this is what I did before, and this is what I did before, and I did that before. But it's not always looking at my career. Yeah. Like, I have to blend everything together. And I have to put everything together in order to see the full jigsaw puzzle, as all these experiences of my life have led to what I'm doing right now. And it's because, like you're saying, I followed the passion against all the odds. And I went through times of not having any money. I went through times of, I'm going to pursue my passion, but it means I'm going to have to live on my buddy's couch for a little while. But to me, the risk, reward, and sacrifice was worth it, because I wasn't being an inconvenience. The person offered it up. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, that's a support system. That's a network. That's sustainability. You know, it wasn't like the guy that's always asking for $20 and a couch to sleep on. It was like, hey, I want to dedicate my life to this because I believe the biggest thing's coming. But I know that I have to go through a really uncomfortable couple months or years to get there. And when you finally can be comfortable in that and find a support system that's okay with that, and nobody's using each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like I said, it's not like that guy that owes you $500 and you're never going to see it.
You're so true in that. And I'll tell you, so I knew there was a people pleaser in me, to the point I didn't hang out with a lot of people. And I'm like, I'm an ambivert. So sometimes I take energy from crowds. Sometimes I get energy from being by myself. And what I started learning was I play the game in the best way that I can play the game at the moment I'm playing the game. I like helping people when I can serve them. I like to do that. It's fun to me. And what I noticed about myself is I would really, really focus on small, intimate groups because I would try to help any and everybody. And it became too much for me. And then when I started taking on my business journey and I'm looking to influence 1 billion people, I'm like, crap, I can't do this one on my own. Like that was the learning lesson. I'm like, I can't do this. And I ended up connecting with one of my mentors, and my mentor, he goes, Cliff, you're a 10 and there's different levels of 10. Go find 10s. And it was like this, I'm like, oh crap. Like that was my light bulb moment to say, oh, I've never intentionally looked for people who are just as good as me in something, who are just as hungry as me in something, but they were a different piece that I wasn't. And so I started getting really intentional with finding those kind of people, and I found them. Because that's what happens in life. When you start looking for things, you start finding those things.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
If you look for it, if you spend the time looking for it, you'll find it.
Yeah. I was like, oh, holy crap. So I go, oh, wow. Like growth never, ever stops. It doesn't stop. It doesn't say like, well, we've done enough. And even with trees are reproducing. So a tree is one tree, but if a tree were to say like, oh, well, I'm done. I am the biggest, strongest tree that I can be. And I don't have spores or anything like that. Like it's just me. Stare at me, love me, embrace me, appreciate me. I go, wow, life is an interesting thing because it does have those things where it's constantly growing, and the plants, it absorbs carbon dioxide to bring oxygen back out. And I'm like, wow, the universe literally, it's built to work for us. Like it's built to work for us. And we sometimes are just like, oh, human beings are destroying the world and like that. And I'm like, wow, we really don't look for where are the solutions. Like we're really good at looking at the problems and pointing at everybody else, how they're all the problem. And I go, if we keep pointing at each other and saying we're the problem, well, yeah, we're all right. We're the problem. And now we're screwed. Like,
And then there's the problem in itself, because back to finding the root of the problem.
yeah,
If you accept the surface area issue and you're like, well, it's their problem, you then wash accountability.
Yeah.
And nobody ever finds the root of it, because once that person takes the blame for a couple of years and then something else happens, then they pass the buck. It's like, this is kind of morbid, but do you remember that movie Fallen? I think it was like, I forget what actor it was, but basically he walks around and it's a spirit, like an evil spirit that possesses your body. Mm-hmm. And as it's walking through a crowd, basically they sing a song, you sing a song, and the song, if the person hears it, the spirit then transfers to the other person. And I want to say it was like Denzel Washington or Samuel L. Jackson is the main character in it. So I think it's called Fallen or Fall or something like that.
Well, but I want to see it.
But it's in real time. You just made me think of that movie because it's very indicative of the way society is. Like if you're walking down the street having a great day, and then all it takes is one person, if you allow them to control you, let's give that context. If you allow your mood to be infiltrated by existential factors, you could be walking down the street having the best day ever, just signing $1 million contract. Some guy crossing the street's having a bad day. He doesn't like you because you're smiling. And he either punches you, says some shitty thing to you or whatever. Dude, he could ruin the rest of your day, and you just forgot that you just did $1 million deal.
Yeah. I have he's a good friend of mine, and he tends to, when he holds onto something, he holds on to it. Like holds on to it. And I love him. I love him because I get him. He's passionate. He's a very passionate person. And I go, if you hit a pothole in a street, do you look back and turn and continue to drive forward because you ran over the pothole?
That's good. I like that.
He started laughing. He's like, no, absolutely not. I go, well, you do that in your life all the time. And he's like my reminder to not do that in my life. I told him, I go, dude, you serve me. Because I literally see looking at that pothole and driving forward and running into something else.
And that's a great example because, if you and take that metaphor, you stare at that pothole long enough, you're going to rear around the car in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that a lot. It's very freeing to come to this philosophy and this school of thought. And what I found is like, dude, it's less stressful. Yeah. Like my days are less stressful. Like I haven't like complained about another human being in probably 7 months. That's like, awesome. You know what I mean? And it's like, because basically what I do is kind of like the pothole. If somebody rubs me the wrong way or whatever, I'm like, it's not worth it. You know what I mean? It's just like, and it's whether it's somebody maliciously attacking or it's just the situation on the side of the road. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what it is. And I want to go back to the tree, and I want to go to something that I learned recently that I haven't talked about publicly, but I will for this. I mentioned it one time, but I'll dive into it a little deeper. In June of 2023. I did a solo mushroom journey, and I did it by myself in a field and a fire. And I literally lit a campfire, did the deal, and sat in a chair for about 9 hours. And I just stared at the flames. And in staring at those flames, I came to this massive realization because I was playing through a lot of things. And this is what propelled all the self-actualizations I've had today. Like, this is what's allowed me to get through my sobriety. This is what's allowed me to let people go. You know what I mean? Like we talked about the other episode of Mel Robbins' new philosophy. But back then, it was in that mushroom journey. It wasn't psychedelics. It wasn't little goblins running around. It was introspective. And my brain was playing back like a newsreel or like a recap. It was playing back different scenes where I was being a chameleon. And where I'm going with the tree is, I was adapting myself to whatever crowd I was going to. So instead, let's go back to the cafeteria. I was like, if I went to the jocks, I would go in there and talk about sports. If I went to, the band group, I'd go in and talk about music. And it wasn't until like recently in my life and through that journey when I realized all I was doing was giving up myself and changing myself as a chameleon, but I was never being myself. I was just being what I needed to be accepted by that group. Now, I'm not saying that group asked me to do that or there was some hierarchy. I'm not saying that at all. I was doing that myself because I thought that was the way to be accepted. And in those 9 hours of flames in front of me, it was basically like what Mel Robbins is saying today is letting it go, but also being yourself. So, and being core to myself. So if I accept a project or I accept a person in my life, they have to be a part of that thread. And so going back to the tree, a tree is a tree, but a tree is a source of oxygen for human beings. A tree is a source of shelter for an animal. A tree is a piece of fuel for human beings or whatever else. A tree can be a utensil. It can be a vessel. It can be a canoe. It can be whatever it needs to be as long as it still sticks to being a tree.
But I 100% agree with that. And what's interesting, because you're how old now, Nate?
I'll be 40 in a couple months. Yeah.
Okay, so you'll be 40 in a couple months. And I go, oh crap, life's just a game of consistently learning about yourself, right? Like even having the conversation that we're having, that interests me. The ability to be a chameleon interests me. And what was interesting, so I say I put on different shoes. The reason I do it very intentionally. So free mind audience, this is for you and for whoever you want to share it with, because I love everybody and they can judge however they want to judge. A lot of people don't like the word manipulation. They don't like that word. It's a dark, bad word. You don't manipulate things. And then I go, okay, well, if your spine is out of alignment, you go to a chiropractor chiropractors doing a form of manipulation, moving your spine from one area to another area. Now you can take it, you can call it whatever you want. You can call it alignment, because I know people love their words, and I know in the subconscious words are important too. So I get that. And then I say to myself, I ended up talking with one of my mentors, and he told me this specific story. I was telling him about this specific guy, and it felt like he went ghost white on me, like ghost white. He's like, don't ever talk to that guy again. I go, what the? Okay. But I go, well, at least tell me why I don't talk to this guy anymore. And he ends up telling me the story. And I go, I'm listening to him, and I go, honestly, that kind of sounds like me. Like what you're saying sounds like me. And he said something that was so brilliant. He goes, oh my goodness, our relationship is becoming closer with you just saying that. And then he says, you're right, you do a similar thing, but your intentions are clearly different. And that was huge to me, because I look at like Jesus and Satan, they're doing the same thing, asking questions. They ask questions, they're very good at it. And they ask questions one is to step closer to God. The other is to step further away. And so I go, wow, the game is about playing the game and also the intentions within the game, and being able to effectively play the game called life, which is also called psychology to me. I know, like, I don't like the game, and everyone talks about how they don't like the game. It's the biggest game that you are playing all the time, whether you like it or not. Like chess, you can say, I don't like this game of chess, and I'm not going to play it. But if you're like, you know what? I don't really like the game of life. Okay, well, you got options. I mean, there's certain options I wouldn't take. I'll say that much, but you do got options. You can complain about the game that everybody's playing all the time, or you can get good at playing the game and serving people in playing the game. Because I'm ultimately looking at, I love the game. The game of life is awesome. To be like, wait, I can influence people and influence myself and go to new levels of growth and realization and get the foods that I want to get the health that I want to get the relationships that I want to get the life that I want to get. I can get all those things. And I just have to learn how to speak and listen effectively. Like, sign me up for that.
It's funny because, yeah, you're right. I never thought about it. I actually was always one that the word manipulation, like, makes me cringe. But not until this moment that I realized, yeah, you're right. If you all of a sudden get a client or somebody you have a casual conversation with, and you're able to evoke those why questions. And a book, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, Simon Sinek. It's a book called Start With Why.
Yeah.
Man, that book changed my life. And really what it did was in this conversation right now, I'm realizing that, yeah, manipulation, if you go in and you help that person through those probing questions, you just manipulated them because you changed their psyche. But you manipulated them for a positive, because in order to get anybody out of their cycle, you have to manipulate them, whether it's you telling them and your words inspire them, or you ask probing questions and their own realizations inspire them.
Yeah. And being able to look at your own shit.
Yep.
And what I'm saying, me saying it felt different to me than hearing you say it. And that's because it's my shit. And it's what I noticed on my journey. It's easy for people to point out other people's shit. Like, it's really easy to do that. Like, and I love reflecting. Like, every time, like, why did that word make me feel that way? Why did that do that too? Why did that? And it was always really interesting to me. And I go, oh my goodness, I'm being programmed all the time. All the time. I go, oh, okay, that's interesting. The people who think they're not being programmed are the ones who are being programmed the most. Like they're the ones like, oh yeah, I know how to limit that stuff. That's like me saying I know how to limit my alcohol. I know how to limit my drug. I know how to, like, no, it's going to influence. It's not to say like not to do it. I'm not there to tell a person what to do and what not to do, but to pretend like it doesn't influence you in some way. Well, that's just arrogance at its best.
I think there's a real defining thing I think that's going to happen in the next year or two, and I think it's already happening. It's those that were motivational speakers or inspirational speakers that were just vapid, empty shells that were just regurgitating what was trending or what they read or things like that, but they had no substance to what they were doing. And I don't even mean just motivational speakers and influencers. I think it's also this is not a bash at actors or actresses by any means, but going into COVID, I feel like out of COVID, you don't see as much of actors and actresses hopping on camera and talking about their life. And it's one of those things where they might have gone, that you used to see them all the time on the TV and commercials promoting products and promoting their next video or their next movie or their next TV show, but they never were just being vulnerable and open. And I think that for whatever reason, and I'm not speaking about everybody, there's plenty of actors and actresses that are very successful in the podcast space and the motivational space, but a large portion of them during COVID, when they didn't have jobs and they didn't have movies to make and there was no sets to go on, I feel like they got stunted. And then all of a sudden what happened was they didn't know how to pivot and rearrange their life because they were set inside of a system that benefited them as well as the system so well. They were isolated from adaptation.
Yeah.
And from that adaptation is where, we saw as a society, stand-up comedians accelerated the podcast world. Now, you can say Alex Hormozy and all those guys, and they did a great job in the podcast world. But really, if you look at the numbers now, the ones that are really growing are actually stand-up comedians. And that's the weirdest thing because they're not on there telling jokes. But the reason that they're so good at it is to be a really good stand-up comedian. And this is the other thing about stand-up comedians. The ones that were just regurgitating the same jokes on every single set across the country, they didn't succeed past COVID either. The stand-up comedians that succeeded were the ones that were introspective as well as observant. And they were able to adapt their sets in real time. And thus then is why I think you look at Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Shane Gillis, those guys that are topping the charts on podcasts, not because of their political beliefs, but because they're conversationalists that are observant and see patterns and they question things and they want to know why. And they have to know why because of their career, because in order to tell a good joke, you got to have context.
True. Yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful insight. And then the other thing that I look at, like Taylor Swift keeps popping up into my head because she's so true to her. She's true to her, good, bad, and indifferent. I'm not a Swiftie myself, but respect to her and then some.
I'll own it. I just told my kids this weekend, they were making fun of me about how I was like one of the OG Swifties. And I said, I have Swiftie, proudly. Respect. I was there. I was with her when the song Tim McGraw came on the radio, dude. I was lockstep. I was like, this girl's going somewhere. And I've been a diehard Swiftie since the beginning.
I had no idea she was she's so blown up that she sells out arenas, and then there's people outside of the arenas.
And there's events around the arenas. When she goes to a town, I don't think people realize it's the concert, and then it's all these like bar events and these boutique events, and like like in Philly when she came last year or the year before. I saw hundreds of like boutiques, like dress shops and things like that were having Taylor Swift nights where moms and their daughters could come in and buy their matching outfits and get their outfits together for the show. And then there's bars that are doing viewing parties of past shows. And I'm just like, you don't see that with like other bands. You know what I mean? It's like a band will come into the town and you go to the Wachovia Center, you watch the show, you go home.
Yeah.
She just, and it's not even her. It's an organic thing because, and I'll tell you why I connected with her as well as other people, because she connects with people, because she's vulnerable in her lyrics and she's vulnerable in her interviews, and she takes the time to know people to as far as she can. And I'll give an example. That song Tim McGraw. When that song Tim McGraw came out, if you remember on the radio stations, they would do them. I think they called them like, I don't know what they're called, ad spots or whatever. But remember, the bands and everybody before Zoom, they had to come to the radio station to do a performance, to promote their show, to sell their tickets. So they would do like little spots where they'd be like, "Hey, it's Counting Crows, and you're listening to WQCM San Diego." And you would hear it in the commercial. You'd be like, "Wow, that's cool. Counting Crows just mentioned my local radio station."
Yeah.
What she did that was so powerful was with that song Tim McGraw. She went around, and instead of driving around the country having all those shows, she took the song and made a special version of every song for every radio station. And there's a part in the lyrics where it's like, it's talking about sitting in the car listening to the radio. She took that part and inserted it. So it was like, I would be listening to it in rural Pennsylvania, and all of a sudden it was like it was within the song. She would mention that radio station. And it didn't break from the lyrics. It didn't break from anything. You didn't notice it if you weren't listening to the lyrics, but she connected on a localized level. And instead of some cheesy thing that everybody else was doing, she found a different way to connect and do it so subtly that you didn't realize it was happening. And then all of a sudden you're like, why do I feel so passionate about this person? I was like, oh, because she gets me. She knows my area. She understands me. And I think that was just powerful. And it wasn't very hard for her to do. She just recorded it, hundreds of times and then inserted it inside the song. But that was for me, that was a turning point where I'm like, she gets it.
It makes me so excited because I realize just how simple the game can be. And oftentimes it's like asking the right questions, because all anyone's looking for is a transformation. Even with global warming, we want to transform how we do things. That's what we're looking to do. And my biggest thing is, you're right. There was some relatability in being a UFC fighter and a Hall of Famer. And then I started going like, oh, wait a minute. Let my rebellious mind play with this. And I didn't even know it was by accident, to be honest with you, because I didn't know how to become relatable. But what made me relatable was the one thing that I didn't want to show up as. And that's the guy who got knocked out of live TV. That was the one thing that I didn't want to happen ever, especially in the UFC, because they replay that thing like multiple times. And in my head, I'm like, wow. It is as embarrassing as I thought it was going to be. It is as embarrassing as I thought it was going to be. But it was like, it allowed, I'm literally sweating even talking about it right now. Right? Like I'm even literally, and I go, yeah, just release your junk. Look, I'm not here to tell you, oh, it's just easy. Release your junk. I get it. But I do know this. Wow, is it freeing when you do? And it actually bonds you to your people. And when I did that, that's when I actually started getting more speaking gigs, because we were like, can you come speak to our Chamber of Commerce? Can you come do this? Can you come do this? And I go, oh my goodness. People want to see you suck and they want to see you rise. They want to see them both. They don't want the rise without the suck, and they don't want the suck without the rise. They want the combination.
Have you ever watched the show Ted Lasso?
Mm-mm.
You need to watch it. You will love that show, and I think it's one of the most powerful shows ever. I'm gonna give it that superlative, and the reason is it rides the roller coaster of it all, and it doesn't just like glamorize being a soccer coach in England. It's like it goes through so much, but it's the way that that Sudeikis' character handles every situation. And he handles every situation, and his character handles every situation with such poise, where he also is calling out people without like screaming, like in some virtue signaling type way.
Yeah.
He manipulates for positivity, but he'll manipulate and like call people. And also it goes back to what we're talking about with the grizzly bear and the teddy bear. He also never breaks character of aggression or anything like that, even against all adversity. And I think when you see that strength, because everybody underestimates him, and because he, I guess I won't give away the plot, but basically he's an American guy that gets brought to England to coach a soccer team, a football soccer team, but he has no idea anything about soccer. And it's the whole show is him learning the sport while he's a major league coach in England, trying to climb the ranks of the Premier League, and it goes through the drop down the ranks and back up on the ranks. And every time he raises the ranks, it's not because they hit the gym harder. Yeah. It's because they every time they win a game and every time they advance, it's because they either became a team or they connected or they were inspired by something that was happening. And it's a really powerful show. It really is a powerful show. It honestly, I tell people it's a show that I survive stressful days, and I'll just go pop it on the TV because it calms me down, man.
So text it to me, and I'll tell you the thing that is so inspiring to me as I go through the journey. We had this wrestling coach. His name was I'm not going to say his name because I'm not going to throw him under the bus like that. But he didn't know how to wrestle. He just didn't know how to wrestle. And everybody would laugh at him and pick on him. And I'm not really the picking on type of person. That's just not my flavor. But I do like to ask why. I like to know why people do what they do. And what I noticed, when you can be truly authentic, it is the scariest thing to do. It can be very, very scary. Because if you tell these kids, hey, I don't know anything about wrestling. I don't know anything about it. But I know about giving your best. Those kids would have looked at it differently. I'm almost sure of it. And so I started seeing like, wow, leadership is being able to be okay with you being you and pulling out the best in other people. Because I didn't realize, this was a realization that I had to come through. I wanted people to be the best for me. Even if it wasn't for me, I still wanted it for me. Where I'm like, you're going to push through this, you're going to get this, and I didn't realize, it took me some time. Oh, it's my job to get them to be the best for themselves. Because when they're the best for themselves, they're going to go all out on themselves. They're going to give 100%. They're going to crush it with or without me. And so my realization was, oh my goodness, leadership has nothing to do with them doing the thing because of me. It has to do with them doing the thing because of them.
It's great you said about the coach thing, because I'll tell you one, and I'll withhold his name, but sometimes he listens or watches, so he can get a good laugh out of this. I actually just told this story on one of my little segments, the I almost quit segment on Monday, and the story was about how I wanted to quit wrestling my freshman year of high school. Mm-hmm. And I chickened out, and I lived in a dorm. I got an academic wrestling scholarship to a boarding school, and my assistant wrestling coach was like 4 doors down from me in the dorm. Mm-hmm. And so I was having a really rough time transitioning from like leaving all my friends that I'd known my whole life into this foreign town. I was away from my parents. I was homesick. I wasn't doing well in school. It was a different caliber of school. So academically, I was horrible. Mm-hmm. And I chickened out, and I didn't go. I wanted to quit. Instead of like knocking on his door and talking to him, I waited till like 1 a.m. and I put a Post-it note on his door. So he was the assistant coach, and everybody would pick on him all the time and bust his balls because he was really funny. He didn't have any sort of career in athletics or in wrestling that was anything that would give him that spot. And we always never understood why he was the assistant coach, because like he knew wrestling and he knew how to be a coach. But it turned out what he was he was the analysis. So he was the analyzer, and he was the one that was always watching all the wrestling matches. He was doing the scouting. He was analyzing everybody and then bringing the feedback and bridging things together. And what I say about that, and I'll elaborate for a little bit that I did on Monday, was how he handled that situation was so powerful, because I was chicken shit to talk to the head coach. And I couldn't talk to him. So I went to the easiest route, which was 1 a.m., put a Post-it note on the door that's 5 feet away from me. And the next morning, I get called into the coach's office, and I'm like sweating. I'm like, oh, fuck, man, this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to get kicked out of school. I'm done. And I walk in the room, and the whole team is there.
Yeah.
And it's everybody, postgraduates that are like Naval Academy and all that stuff. Like those guys that are going to D1, and I'm a freshman. And they're sitting there, and these beast mode dudes are just sitting there, and they're not staring at me angrily. They're just looking at me. And they did the same thing. It's like, it goes back to the why. And then they all just said, why? Why do you want to quit? Why do you want to go home? And not in an aggressive bullying way. It was really just like, we want to know why. And I don't know what conversations happened between them and the coaches, and I never asked. Because honestly, I never took the power of that situation until my adulthood. I didn't see the power, and I never thought about it again until a couple of weeks ago. And I thought about how much of my life has changed because I stayed in the sport. And I stayed in the sport because at the end of the day, what they were able to drill down and pull the onion layers away was human connection, and I was lonely. And all of it changed from that moment, where it was like, I feel like I was like, man, I almost quit a sport that led to, not only did it lead to great success in high school, it got me into college, which then led me to, from that network, led me into the same, like my first major job with my business, my first major client. So many things rippled from that moment.
Yeah.
And it goes back to kind of what I was trying to lead into what you said in the beginning was, we underestimate people a lot in their lives. Yeah. And we underestimate their value because they don't fit in the box that we perceive they should. Instead of like really diving 1 layer deeper or 3 layers deeper and finding the why.
Yeah.
And just all of it goes back to the why, man. It all goes back to the why.
Oh yeah. And I love that so much, because I'm like Russell Brunson, and I like understanding leaders and why they do what they do and how things show up. It just interests me. And I look at cult, and I also look at culture, and they're both super powerful.
Yep.
Super powerful. Like the right culture, I have wrestled people who are in the right culture, and it was like, oh my goodness, this guy has a different kind of a strength, a different kind of a will. He's not just wrestling for himself. He's wrestling for him and his teammates. They're different. And so you can be in an individual sport and you're not in an individual sport. You know, I'll be the first to contribute to that.
It's a unique sport in that sense, and I think it helps with that. And I can't, like, in the past couple of weeks since I came to that realization, I'm like, dude, I would have never, like, I ended up getting in the 100-win club. I was a captain my junior and my senior year. I 3-time state place winner and all that stuff that never would have happened if I just made my decision on my own and not been open to hearing other people's opinions.
So I want to take that actually and start talking about the cliff notes too.
Yes. Let's close out with the cliff notes conversation. Yep.
Yeah, because what I'm really seeing, people just need those little nuggets. Because when they can see the little nugget, they'll look at something differently that they never looked at before, and that will change the trajectory. That's how you 10x. And so going like, hey, if you have everyone has cliff notes. Everybody has them. And the more I go through this journey, like, one thing that I notice, when someone tells me I don't have the thing, they can go fuck themselves, and this is why. The worst thing that you can do for a person, in my opinion, is take their power. That is the worst thing that you can do to a person, is say, I have the vehicle, I have the thing. Could you imagine Serena and Venus and their dad saying, oh, you need this special racket. this racket's going to make you the greatest thing ever. Or Tiger Woods going like, oh, when we get this golf club, yeah, now you're going to smack that thing into orbit. And I go, oh, wow, people do that a lot. They create a tactic and they say the tactic's the thing, and they don't allow you to become the person that you need to become to achieve the thing. And so the cliff notes are about, okay, how do you have to see something? What do you have to see? Just telling you like a generalization and delegation. No, why are you not delegating yet? What's stopping you from doing it? Is it something that you don't want to do? Do you want to be a freelancer? And maybe that's what you want. But know what you want. Know what you want and know what you don't. And then ask yourself, if I am doing what I don't, why am I doing it?
There's a lot of people this week, especially, and obviously prior, that are listening to Kendrick Lamar more than they ever were before. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing I invite everybody to when it comes to this, and it ties to this, is to listen to the lyrics of Not Like Us.
Yeah.
Don't just the beat's amazing and the song's amazing, but really the lyrics. The reason it reminded me, because you just brought up Venus, is the part where he talks about that in there. Mm-hmm. And he talks about her specifically inside the lyrics, and talks about multiple people. And yeah, it's a diss track. Yeah. But if you really read the lyrics, it's not a diss track. It's an essential piece of life to understand that you aren't like everybody else. And there are people that are like you, but it doesn't mean you have to change for the others. You just have to go for your crowd.
Yep. And it's like, there's going to be people, and you know this, me and you can go into different audiences, and different audiences are going to resonate with us differently, even when we say all the right things. Mm-hmm. And I go, wow, there's more than enough for everybody. Like, look, the truth, what I think is going to happen with global warming, this is what I think is going to happen. Either it's real or it's not. That's one. If it is, we're going to be in deep shit, and then really smart humans are going to figure it out because they want to live. It is not going to be the world like, all right, everybody stop driving your fucking cars. Like, that's not going to be the thing that changes it. I'm almost sure of it. I could be wrong. Be like, and if I am, then you could all ring my doorbell and they're like, you were wrong, Cliff. Everyone did stop their cars, and that made everything better. Like, okay. But as I look at it, I go, okay, it's going to be really smart people who figure this out. And I actually connect with really smart people. I like connecting with them because I like supporting them, because people generally, I am generalizing like a mother effer right now, but the generalization is they don't actually come up to celebrate the person who is up doing the thing. In fact, we're still bitching about who's doing everything wrong instead of celebrating the people who are actually doing something right to make it better.
There's if you ever watch, I'll close out with this one too, and this is the Netflix movie Don't Look Up. Mm-hmm. If you watch that movie, that screams that right there. Yeah. Where it's like it's just a bunch of scientists that are like theming facts, but because the facts are not curtailed with flashy images and a celebrity, like nobody's listening to them, that this asteroid is propelling into the planet.
We gotta make a movie.
Yeah. Dude, the movie's great, dude.
Where a scientist is trying to explain something like, we need to connect that guy with the marketer.
Yeah, you're like, then that's exactly what it was, because they, instead of prepping them and doing media training and all that, they just pull them out of the lab and they're throwing them on a news channel, and they're like, tell the world what you found, and they're like, an asteroid's coming, and they start talking in their language, and everybody checks out and starts laughing. And meanwhile, the asteroid is literally in front of people's faces, and they don't even ignore it because their phone's in their face. They're ignoring it.
It's freaking awesome. Like,
the movie's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I love being human just as anything else. Because I'll tell you, everybody, if it feels like I'm calling you out, I'm calling me out too. I'm just as human as any other human being. I'm doing the best that I can. And I appreciate excellence and I do my best to do excellence, but I'm going to fall. I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to check myself. And I think that's what comedians do best is like they allow you to check yourself with laughter. They're very good at it.
It's a lot of times they get a bad rap because people talk about if you put like 10 comedians together in a room, it's like the most depressive conversation ever, but it's actually the most real conversation because they're self-deprecating and in the sense that they own and they're accountable for their flaws.
Yeah.
You know, I'll leave the episode with this Southern quote that most people don't like, but because it's vulgar, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
I do love that. And we went an hour and 20. So that means that was a really great conversation.
It was, man. It was. Yeah, I put that extra half hour in there to boost some time. But dude, this was fantastic conversation.
Yeah.
I always appreciate taking the time with you and the insights you share and sharing stories. And I know because I see the audience growing. So it's one of those things that we're connecting with people, and I hope that everybody out there, while we're telling our stories, you can find nuggets like we're talking about, the Cliff Notes, and everybody make sure you check out Clifford's new series for Cliff Notes and some easy nuggets there. And on our end, same thing on LinkedIn and others. Check out Free Mind 5. It's 5 articles a week, 1 per day, and it's an easy 5 minutes of your day. So together we're going to take up 10 minutes of your day, but trust me, it's gonna benefit to a positive swing. So
amen to that. All right, my brother.
Awesome,
I will talk with you soon. Audience, appreciate you and keep being amazing.
All right, take care, man. Love you.
All right, brother. Have a good one. I'll catch you later.